not say anything that would destroy the video. So you watch. I'm gonna be on today. Okay?
Honestly, all one of us have to do is say something that you can't put on there.
Yep, that's true. So you will also be on today.
Could you just cut clips off?
If I knew how to do that.
I could.
You're my favorite. Okay. I am introducing to you the tariff of abominations. A tariff so evil, so vile that this is a tariff that replaced the original tariff, 1828. 1828. I think my computer's stuck. Wow. Okay. In 1828, the Congress created a new tax on imports. And as a reminder, who says, yay, tariffs?
People.
Well, the Federalists are gone.
Conservative. Jacksonian.
No. No, they're the conservatives.
Oh, then the other
Alexander Liberal.
He's dead.
Liberal.
Liberals, very good. Why? Do we still not understand the difference between conservative and liberal?
No,
It's like you throw this thing out and then I say no and then you say the other thing. And then I say yep and then you're like, I knew it. But it doesn't sound like you knew it.
But you said that the liberals are now today they're the conservative.
No, I did not say the liberals are now the conservatives. I said the Democrats are now liberals. Okay, remember, liberals, hooray for government. Conservatives, boo hiss, federal government, hooray for state government, okay? In an economic sense, who says hooray for tariffs? It's a political party.
The government.
The Liberals. Democrats.
In an economic sense, who is happy that the federal government is taxing imports?
Federal government.
In an economic sense. Businesses, okay, thank you, businesses. Because Americans will now be steered toward buying American-made products. So there's a winner. A second winner would be the federal government. They're making money. Who says boo hiss?
Small town business.
Consumers, okay, very good. People who buy because suddenly things are more expensive. Now let's think about geography. Where are most of the factories in the U.S. at this time? North. So what region of the country says hooray?
The South.
The North. What? The North, where the factories are. The North, where the factories are, because there will be increased demand for stuff. And what region of the country does not have factories?
South.
And now we can identify that a region of the country says hooray for taxes and another region of the country says boo hiss for taxes. The North says hooray. The South says boo hiss. You wake up in the middle of the night and this guy is standing right above you. Want some milk? Look at that guy. And the photographer, by the way, is saying smile, and he says, I am. This is Calhoun. This is a new person on the horizon. This is the new Thomas Jefferson, only angrier, meaner. But he is Jeffersonian in his views. He was totally... What did you just say?
Nothing.
What did you say? What did you say?
Wasn't Jefferson already angry?
Jefferson's dead. He's gone. He's gone. This is the new champion of states' rights. This is the new champion of states' rights. This is the new Thomas Jefferson. And he looks at this tariff and says, it's awful. It's awful. It hurts. He's from South Carolina. South Carolina is a slave state. South Carolina is a southern state. He said, it's terrible. It'll hurt the South. And we're not doing it. We're not doing it. We will nullify South Carolina. will nullify the new tariff. This is just like the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions that Jefferson supported way back when Kentucky and Virginia opposed the Sedition Act. Jefferson said, let's just nullify them. The question, of course, was, can states nullify federal law? But that question was never answered because the Sedition Act simply expired. So here we go again. Here's a new federal policy. South Carolina says, we're not doing it. We're going to nullify the tariff. And if you force us, this is new now, if you force us to pay this tax anyway, we will simply secede. Not succeed. Secede. Leave the union. Quit the country. Start our own country. The country of South Carolina. Okay, so this is new. And part of his argument was, holy cow, if a national, this should say federal, this is wrong, sorry. If the federal government can force states to do something against the state's will, then what's to stop the federal governments from someday outlawing slavery in South Carolina? And I love slavery. I love slavery. And my dog, and my wife, and my other dog, and my gun. I already said cousin. That's my wife.
Oh,
Okay. This happened to be the vice president. So Andrew Jackson is the president. This is the vice president. He resigned. He resigned as vice president. Okay. Now, this is another interesting phenomenon because just like when Adams was president and Jefferson was vice president, and they disagreed, we have here President Andrew Jackson, who supposedly is a Jacksonian Democrat, who supposedly should be opposed. He's a conservative. He should be opposed to this tariff. Jackson should be opposed to this tariff. His vice president certainly is. But that's not what Jackson said. Jackson said, no, I like the tariff. South Carolina better frickin' pay it. So once again, we have a disagreement between a president and a vice president. Okay, so let's see where this leads. We have South Carolina saying we're not paying it. And if you send soldiers in to force us to do so, we will quit the country and we will fight. We will fight you. By the way, it's South Carolina. 30-ish years later, 32 years later, guess what state's the first to secede? South Carolina. Okay? It's like history repeating itself. It's kind of fascinating, actually. Okay. Any questions here? Let's keep going. So we now have a crisis. So here's South Carolina. This time period is called the nullification crisis. South Carolina's state legislature passes a law nullifying the tariff. Saying we're not doing it. We're not doing it. They passed their own law. Just like Kentucky and Virginia passed their own law nullifying the Sedition Act. Here we go again. Here we go again. But remember, they never settled the Sedition Act question about whether states can nullify the Sedition Act because the Sedition Act expired. So here we go again. South Carolina passes their own law. And the country says, can they do that? Can they nullify a federal law? Can they do that? And South Carolina says, if you come in here, we're out. We're done. They're threatening secession. Okay? Do you like your favorite phrase again? No. Okay. I drew this.
Beautiful. It's beautiful.
This little thing tells a story. Okay? That big fellow there, that's Andrew Jackson. You can tell because he's larger. And those things, those are soldiers. They're soldiers. Obviously, they're soldiers. He sends these soldiers to South Carolina, Charleston. That's the capital of South Carolina. He sends soldiers to South Carolina. The soldiers end up collecting the tax in South Carolina. Okay, and obviously South Carolina doesn't like this at all. You're sending soldiers into our state. We're out. We're going to secede. Get ready for a rumble. Let's roll. We need a hero, man. We need someone to save the day. Here he comes, Henry Clay. Henry Clay again. He's the guy that wrote the Missouri Compromise.
I mean, like,
He flies in and says, "I can handle this. This is easy. I'm the savior of the day." So Henry Clay, became the author of a compromise bill. This bill lowered, see the two rocket arrows going down, lowered the tax, the tariff. Okay. Who says yay? South Carolina, right? They're happy that they're now paying a lower tax, but it didn't get rid of the tax. It kept the tax. So now who says yay to that?
factories in North.
Okay, the factories, the federal government, okay? Both sides aren't perfectly happy. The North wants higher taxes. The South wants no taxes. The compromise is a lower tax. North says, hooray, it still exists. The South says, hooray, it's lower. Neither side is crazy about it. Both sides can live with it. And this lower tax would stay for 10 years. And it appears that, once again, the crisis has been averted. By the way, South Carolina removed their own, they nullified their own nullification act. South Carolina nullified their own nullification act. Okay. Okay. Crisis averted. Again. Okay. So again, what this cartoon is doing is simply listed down here. The tariff was lowered. A law called the Force Act allowed the president to enforce the law using soldiers. That's kind of interesting. And South Carolina repealed their own nullification act. Let's look at this one for a second as you're writing it down. Force Act allowed the president to use soldiers to enforce the law. Does that sound familiar? It should, actually. A similar law was passed when George Washington was president. This was simply a renewal of that. It was the Force Act that Kennedy would later use to send soldiers into southern states to enforce desegregation.
Oh,
It's the same thing. The federal government says desegregate. Southern states say, no, we're not going to do it. What are you going to do about it? And the federal government says, well, we're going to send troops. That's what we're going to do about it. Here, they did it. 100 years later, actually more than 100 years later, the federal government would do the same thing. Okay? So it appears that the crisis has been averted once again. Previously, Kentucky and Virginia passed a nullification of the Sedition Act, but that crisis was averted because the Sedition Act expired. Now, we have a new tariff. South Carolina says we're not going to do it, and we're going to secede if you force us. And crisis is once again averted. So we still don't know the answer to this question. Do you know the question? We still don't know the answer. Can
states nullify federal law?
That's right. We still don't know. We still don't know if states can nullify federal law. We don't know the answer because the crisis was averted again. So we're just going to have another crisis to see what's going to happen this time. Okay. Topic number 3 is another supposed crisis here. So here we are in the state of Georgia. And there's a group of people called the Cherokee. They're Native Americans. And they live right there. Okay. And, if you picture Indian, let's be stereotypic here. Let's throw out some stereotypic things like picture an Indian looking house. What are you looking at? You're looking at a teepee, right? And do Native Americans, do they plant crops and ride on tractors? No, they paint on their face as they chase the buffalo, and their teepees are taken down because the buffalo went over there over the night. So they follow their food. But you are talking about the stereotypic conclusions about a specific group of Native Americans called the Dakota or the Sioux. These aren't them. These are the Cherokee. And they lived in regular houses. They farmed. They worked. They accepted the what I'll call white culture. The Cherokee had concluded, we're not going to live the nomadic life of our ancestors. We will accept the idea of private ownership of land, and okay, we accept it. Okay, so here they are, they're living. Okay, they're living like regular Americans. I don't mean that as that's better or worse. I'm just telling you that the Cherokee had accepted the white way of doing things. So here they are living in regular houses, doing regular things. I'm not suggesting that the other way is not regular. I'm saying it from the point of view of the people at the time. Okay? But there's still a problem with these Cherokee. They're not white. You can act white and you can pretend you're white, but you're not white, you're an Indian. You're an Indian. So the state of Georgia attempted to remove all of the Cherokee from the state of Georgia. Okay? You understand? So the state of Georgia is confiscating Native American land. And the Cherokee are like, wait a minute, we're not chasing the buffalo. We don't live in teepees. My house is right next to your house. And the state of Georgia says, not good enough. You're an Indian and you're not white. You got to go. Okay? So before I tell you Wahaba, let me just remind you that in this situation, the state of South Carolina said, we're not doing it. And the federal government said, yeah, you are. Andrew Jackson said, yeah, you are. Okay? So Andrew Jackson is siding with the federal government over a state. When a state attempts to do something, Jackson says, you can't do that. You have to do what the federal government says. Right?
Right.
Okay. So here are the Cherokee. They're being removed from the state of Georgia. And you know what the Cherokee did? Did they take up arms and fight a resistance? Nope. They did what you should do if you are ever wronged by anyone. Sue them! The Cherokee sued the state of Georgia.
Nice.
They took them. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So much money
You
for
can
that.
you can sue. They took Georgia to court. Now, does anyone happen to know when a state is being sued, who's the referee? Who gets to decide? The Supreme Court. That's exactly right. It goes straight to the Supreme Court. This is a Supreme Court case. The state of Georgia is being sued by a specific person named Worcester. He's a Cherokee. Okay. And the Supreme Court listened to the arguments and said, nope, Cherokee, you're right. You can stay. The Supreme Court ordered the Cherokee to stay. Now, who is the enforcer of Supreme Court decisions? Don't answer yet. 100 years later, the Supreme Court would say, desegregate schools, desegregate. And then said, all right, you enforce my decision. Who is you? The President of the United States. In this case, it would have been Kennedy. In this case, who is the enforcer? Who, Dad? What? What?
Kennedy's the president.
Kennedy is president 100 years later.
Oh,
Jackson.
Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson is the president. So the Supreme Court says Cherokee can stay. President Jackson, enforce my wishes. And Jackson says, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it.
Impeach.
Oh, and there was a move to impeach Jackson. The problem was that he was incredibly popular. Most white Americans liked him for this decision. There's a difference between right and wrong and popular. Jackson openly defied the Supreme Court. And he was fine. Nothing happened to him. A few people said, we got to remove this guy. And most said, but I like what he did. And he refused to enforce the decision. He argued that the federal government had no right to tell a state what to do. Did you just hear me? he argued that the federal government had no right to tell a state what to do.
But that's
One
what
slide
he
ago,
says.
he was telling South Carolina,
What-
you have to obey the federal government. One slide later, he's saying we have no right to tell Georgia what to do. Now, is Andrew Jackson a confused person? Did he fall down the stairs real hard and hit his head? Or, in both cases, did he get what he wanted?
You got what he wanted.
This is not a dumb president. This is a shrewd president. A president that uses the law to get what he wants done. In this case, he wanted South Carolina to pay the tariff, so he's going to side with federal government, hooray. In this case, he wanted the Cherokee gone, so he's going to side with the idea of states' rights. Once again, just like Jefferson, we have a guy that's not a purist. Jackson was not a hard case conservative. Jefferson was not a hard case conservative. Jackson was a moderate. Sometimes he sides liberal, sometimes he sides conservative. It depends on the issue. So the Cherokee were forced to march along one of three paths. Does anyone happen to know what this is called?
Trail of
It's
Tears.
called the Trail of Tears. Very good. It is the death rate for the Trail of Tears was higher than the concentration camps in Germany during World War II. Please note, I did not say the death camps of Germany. I said the concentration camps. But still, that's pretty bad. Something like 1 out of every 4 Cherokee died on the way to this chunk of land over here that they called Indian land. And they promised the Indians, just move to that chunk, we'll never take it away from you.
Uh-huh.
Why?
So here the Cherokee, they're being forced to move. In 1832, the IRA was passed, Indian Removal Act. The Indian Removal Act was passed. It ordered all Native Americans on the east side of the Mississippi River to leave. And where would they go? Indian land. A designated chunk of land that the U.S. would give to the Native Americans, and you can keep it. Today we call that Oklahoma. So you can see the Cherokee were forced to move, the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, the Sauk Indians, Seminole, who apparently walked on water,
Heck
they
yeah.
took boats. Okay. Now, what I'm about to say, don't go overboard, but this is similar to the decision that the Germans made prior to the final solution, but similar to the decision the Germans made as they conquered land. They ordered Jews to leave. Now, the next conclusion was, no, stay. Why don't you get on that train? It's going to Poland. Okay, but they went one step further. So Germany went, well, probably more like 7 steps further. Germany went a little bit further, but it is similar in that initially, Hitler was a very good American history student. Hitler looked at America and said, how did they get so powerful? Oh, land acquisition, get rid of the people that you feel are inferior, be productive economically, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he looked at this and said, we should do that. Who are our Native Americans? Oh, the Slavs, the Jews, the Gypsies, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Now this guy was a Seminole. And there he is. The U.S. government has said all Seminoles must leave Florida. And this guy says, no, I'm not going. Now, is he going to sue the federal government? That's not going to work, right? Jackson is not going to enforce the wishes of the Supreme Court anyway. So this guy says, nah, let's just go to war. Let's go to war. And he engages in something called the Second Seminole War, which tells you there was a First Seminole War. You seem to skip over that part. We did. This is the story of the Second Seminole War. Have you been to Florida?
Oh, I have.
What is the geographic feature that exists in this chunk of land right there?
Disneyland. Disney World.
It's swampy, right? It's the Everglades. Okay. How effective are horses in swampland? Not at all. The U.S. Army realized that this guy was being resisting, so sent an army to go capture him. This war, the Second Seminole War, is the third longest war in American history. They couldn't get the guy. By the way, his name is Osceola. And yes, Osceola, Wisconsin is named after this guy. Okay?
Is that where they're the chiefs?
That's exactly why they're the chiefs.
Oh my god.
Now you know. Okay?
But it happened down there without.
Just as a reminder, what Georgia did was kick out all Cherokee. The Cherokee resisted through court, didn't work. So the Supreme Court decision to allow the Cherokee to stay was ignored by Jackson, and that's why this guy said, well, we're just going to have to do this on our own. And it lasted for 7 years, right? Well, 8 years, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 7 years, 7 years. Only 2 wars in American history are longer. The war that we're engaged in right now in Afghanistan and Iraq, some people call it the war on terrorism, okay? America's longest war in Vietnam.
So like, will there ever be another war in the U.S., do you think, like this, where we would fight a group of people in our own nation? Or are you there?
I don't know. I hope not.
Well, you're supposed to know these things.
Come on, modern.
I'm a history teacher.
You're supposed to know everything.
Wow. Zach, you think a lot about me.
Okay.
Okay. The end. That's all the notes we're taking for today. So you can put Zetave. And now I want you to retrieve all things Blue Book essay. We'll resume when the big hand is on the floor. So you have about 3 minutes to stand, stretch, get a quick drink, whatever you need to do. I'll see you in 3 minutes. Okay. You need to go to the bathroom, go take care of it. You need to get a drink, go take care of it. You want to just stand and visit. You want to get on your phones and have your phone fixed because that's your nookie. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. See that soda? Like, so they made all tribes on the east side of Mississippi move. Why is there like half of it on the west side?
Mississippi River is right here.
Yeah.
The Sauk Indians were located on both sides. However, they wanted to stick together, so they made the decision, we'll just go. Yes, today's video will not be posted.
Yes.
Because I said Southerners marry their cousins.
Was this him writing or was this him
It's just for people north of
writing? What kind of writing was it?
What kind of writing? You mean like, was it a letter or something?
Yeah.
I believe it was, actually. I believe it was.
Part of your man of great knowledge. Do you know which coast uses the SAT?
Minnesota uses it too. Yeah. Minnesota, you can use both. I think SAT is an East Coast thing. It's here.
People can deal with our. Yeah, people can deal with it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, if you don't want to share our stories, mine's also the same. I didn't think about like copying it.
No worries.
Mine's good. What was he writing? What was he writing? No, people hacked it. What was he writing?
What time do you
Okay, so my phone this morning. I don't have an hour. I'll be running ever.
Wait, is it work then?
Not for us. Unless you're in honors. Honors is like that. Does someone want to play Game Pigeon?
Just like that.
Yesterday was a Sudoku. Can you attack me yesterday? Oh, there's still a game. Game is one. Did you get a new phone?
Was Sedition Act capitalized every time you write it?
I hate
Okay.
Sedition Act is capitalized.
Like he talks like quick.
Who's that?
Mr. Erickson.
Giggity gig.
What? Mr.
Eric-
Erickson sounds like.
Oh my god, I thought you were saying he was in there.
Oh, no.
Mr. Erickson sounds like Quagmire?
Yeah, he does.
Does he?
A little bit. I can
Mr.
see
Erickson is the reason I'm failing this class.
But not like, not like.
Has nothing to do with you, huh?
No, it's definitely him. He's an awful teacher.
Oh, crap.
This video needs to be destroyed.
Yeah, it does.
See?
Are
Here you go.